Welcome to China Truths. Today we will bring you the following stories. China is conducting problematic research in Arctic. U.S., Canada Navies sail through Taiwan Strait after China war games encircled Taiwan. U.S. House committee chairs criticize Harvard over handling of anti-CCP protest incident. Trump says he wouldn't have to use military force if China blockades Taiwan. Now, let's dive into the details. China Truths. China is conducting problematic research in Arctic. China's research activities in the Arctic may carry significant security implications for the United States, U.S. lawmakers said. The U.S. House-China panel has called on the State Department and the Pentagon to take stronger action to address problematic Chinese research in the Arctic that could be used for both civilian and military applications, saying that these activities may pose significant security risks to the United States and its NATO allies. The House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, outlined its concerns in an October 16 letter addressed to Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and Secretary of State Antony Blinken. In recent years, the PRC has increased its effort to seek access to and exert influence in the Arctic, including expanding dual civil-military research efforts in the region. Representatives John Molinar, a Republican from Michigan, and Raja Krishnamurti, a Democrat from Illinois, chairman and ranking Democrat member of the committee, respectively, wrote in a letter, using the acronym of China's official name, the People's Republic of China. The Arctic is critical to U.S. national security interests and the defense of our homeland, and we must work with our allies to preserve our defense treaty commitments. The lawmakers pointed out that China's access to the Arctic for satellite communication ground stations and scientific research greatly expands the operational effectiveness of the People's Liberation Army, PLA, and furthers the PRC's global ambitions. The bipartisan committee wants to know, among other things, how the U.S. government evaluates the threats posed by Chinese research involvement in the Arctic, especially in terms of missile defense, submarine detection, and satellite tracking capabilities. The lawmakers requested a response by November 15. China has teamed up with Russia to expand its military and Coast Guard presence in the Arctic region, which has an estimated 13% of the planet's undiscovered oil and 30% of its undiscovered natural gas reserves, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. Earlier this month, China announced that its Coast Guard vessels had ventured into the Arctic Ocean for the first time, conducting patrols alongside Russian ships in waters where Beijing had long sought to exert its influence. Despite being 900 miles away from the Arctic Circle, China has declared itself a near-Arctic state and has added the Polar Silk Road to its Belt and Road Initiative, a multi-billion-dollar project aimed at bolstering Beijing's geopolitical sway by building ports, railways, and other infrastructure worldwide. Norway's Svalbard archipelago is a crucial location for Beijing's Arctic ambitions, the lawmakers pointed out in the letter. The first Chinese research station, the Arctic Yellow River Station, was established in Svalbard in 2004. Among the organizations operating at the station is the China Research Institute of Radio Wave Propagation, CRP, a unit of China Electronics Technology Group Corporation, which the Pentagon designated as a military-controlled company. The lawmakers said that some CRP projects in Svalbard, as registered at the Norwegian government's Research in Svalbard portal, could have significant military uses. CRP replicated these projects in its research collocation with PLA units, enhancing the PRC's military capabilities, particularly in areas such as missile guidance, over-the-horizon radar detection, satellite communications, space object tracking, early warning systems, electronic warfare, submarine detection, and strategic communication and control in polar regions. L.J. Eads, who founded the Data Abyss, an open-source intelligence platform funded by the Pentagon, was quoted as saying in the letter. In addition to Norway, China also operates research centers in another NATO member state, Iceland. The China-Iceland Arctic Science Observatory, CIAO, was formally established in 2018, but according to lawmakers, data collection began in 2013, a year after the Polar Research Institute of China and the University of Iceland signed an agreement to establish CIAO. According to the letter, data collected by CIAO have never been made publicly available despite assurances of open access. The lawmakers expressed concern that China could use this data to improve the accuracy of its radar systems that detect submarines, ships, and aircraft across long distances, thereby improving military surveillance and target tracking. The letter cited a 2021 research paper, stating that the Rio meter and antenna system deployed at CIAO covers a large area in the Denmark Strait. Gregory Falco, a professor of systems engineering at Cornell University, told the House panel that this system can monitor the strategic submarine traffic of the US and NATO through the GIUK Gap, the naval choke point encompassing the seas between Greenland, Iceland, and the UK. Lawmakers also noted that by 2023, the Polar Research Institute of China, an organization directly under China's Ministry of Natural Resources, had poured approximately $5 million into the observatory, covering almost all of its expenses. Although some Icelandic stakeholders raised concerns regarding the security implications of the research conducted and planned at CIAO, no formal security review has taken place, the letter reads. Icelandic law currently lacks specific provisions for national security-related review in such cases. Iceland has no military, and under a 1951 defense treaty, the United States is responsible for the island nation's defense under the NATO umbrella. The lawmakers urged Washington to support Iceland in conducting a national security review of research activities carried out by Chinese scientists and to halt any Chinese research used for military purposes on Icelandic territory. The State Department said it doesn't comment on congressional correspondence but highlighted the U.S. concerns about Beijing's growing presence in the Arctic region. We have growing concerns about the PRC's increased activities and presence in the Arctic, including dual-use capable scientific research, which could be used for future military operations, a department spokesperson told the Epoch Times via email. As the PRC engages in the Arctic, we encourage it to uphold international standards of transparency, rule of law, and accountability, and to abide by its international legal obligations. U.S. Canada Navies sail through Taiwan Strait after China war games encircled Taiwan. A U.S. guided missile destroyer and a Canadian frigate sailed through the Taiwan Strait on October 20, less than a week after China conducted military exercises around Taiwan. The U.S. Navy's 7th Fleet issued a statement on October 20 saying that the destroyer USS Higgins and the Canadian frigate HMCS Vancouver made a routine transit a day earlier through waters where high seas freedom of navigation and overflight apply in accordance with international law. The transit through the Taiwan Strait, one of the busiest waterways in the world, demonstrated Washington's and Ottawa's commitment to upholding freedom of navigation for all countries, according to the statement. The international community's navigational rights and freedoms in the Taiwan Strait should not be limited. The United States rejects any assertion of sovereignty or jurisdiction that is inconsistent with freedoms of navigations, overflight, and other lawful uses of the sea and air, it reads. Tensions in the Taiwan Strait are escalating because of the Chinese government's continued coercion and military threats against Taiwan. On October 14, China launched a large-scale, one-day military exercise around the island, deploying its Navy, Air Force, Rocket Force, and Coast Guard. The Chinese military operation drew international condemnation, with the Pentagon calling it irresponsible, disproportionate, and destabilizing. Beijing rejects the view that the Taiwan Strait is an international waterway, arguing that it has sole jurisdiction over the body of water. Beijing also considers Taiwan to be a breakaway province, even though it has never ruled the island since seizing power on the mainland in 1949. Responding to the transit by the U.S. and Canadian warships, China's Eastern Command accused the two countries of causing trouble and undermining peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, according to a statement. The Taiwanese Foreign Ministry issued a statement thanking Canada and the United States for taking action to affirm the Taiwan Strait's status as an international waterway. This is the fourth time in the past 2 years that the United States and Canada have jointly sailed through the Taiwan Strait, demonstrating the determination of democratic allies to take concrete actions to maintain peace across the Taiwan Strait, the ministry stated. The ministry noted that the Taiwanese government will continue strengthening its self-defense and resolutely fight against the expansion of authoritarianism. The U.S. Navy vessels, occasionally accompanied by ships from U.S. allies, transit the strait about once a month. U.S. destroyer USS Rafael Peralta and Canadian frigate HMCS Ottawa jointly transited the Taiwan Strait in November 2023, according to the U.S. Navy's 7th Fleet. On October 19, defense ministers of the Group of Seven, or G7, democracies issued a joint statement from their meeting in Naples, Italy, expressing support for peace across the Taiwan Strait. We reaffirm that maintaining peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait is indispensable to international security and prosperity, said the G7 defense ministers, who represent Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the UK, and the United States. We are concerned about provocative actions, particularly the recent People's Liberation Army military drills around Taiwan. There is no change in the basic positions of the G7 members on Taiwan, including stated One China policies. We call for a peaceful resolution of cross-strait issues. The United States has a One China policy, which asserts that there is only one sovereign state with the name China, but it is different from the One China principle under which Beijing asserts sovereignty over Taiwan. The Taiwanese Foreign Ministry stated that it sincerely appreciates the support from G7 member states. As a responsible member of the Indo-Pacific community, Taiwan will continue to strengthen cooperation with G7 member countries and take concrete actions to uphold the core values of democracy, freedom, human rights, and the rule of law, the ministry said in a statement. It will work in solidarity with like-minded partners to safeguard the rules-based international order and promote prosperity and stability in the region and throughout the world. U.S. House committee chairs criticize Harvard over handling of anti-CCP protest incident. Documents show Harvard disciplined protesters for disrupting a speech by the Chinese ambassador but not a Chinese student who dragged a protester away. Chairs of 2 House committees criticized Harvard University on October 18 for reprimanding student protesters who disrupted a speech by the Chinese ambassador while failing to discipline a Chinese student who forcibly removed one of the protesters. The incident occurred on April 20, when Chinese Ambassador Xia Feng gave an opening address for the Harvard Kennedy School of Government's China Conference 2024, an annual student-run event organized by the Greater China Society. His speech was interrupted by several protesters who yelled slogans including "China lies," "People die," and "Free Tibet." One of the protesters, Taiwanese-American student Cosette Wu, shouted that China had devastated Hong Kong's democracy and was seeking to do the same to Taiwan. She was allegedly dragged out of the hall by her arms by a male student who helped organize the event. Other protesters were escorted out by university police. Representative John Molinar, a Republican from Michigan, chairman of the House Select Committee on the CCP, wrote to interim Harvard University President Alan Garber in July to ask several questions about the incident, including what disciplinary actions, if any, had been taken. The committee on October 18 published some of the documents Molinar obtained. Molinar and Representative Virginia Fox, a Republican from North Carolina, chairwoman of the House Education and Workforce Committee, said the university failed to apply its rules consistently. According to the documents obtained by Molinar, the Chinese student who dragged the other student away has allegedly violated school rules on physical violence, but he escaped disciplinary action because a dean felt the student had been punished enough after the student's personal information was published online. The student has never been officially identified, but his alleged identity was widely shared in Chinese-speaking social media circles shortly after the incident. In an October 18 statement, Molinar said the Ivy League school is punishing brave students who spoke out against the CCP's human rights abuses while not only letting the student off scot-free but also handing him an apology. The committee chair called on U.S. universities to wake up to Beijing's influence on U.S. campuses and protect students who speak out against the Chinese government. Fox also said the university failed to apply its rules consistently during the anti-Israel protests that flare up on campuses across the country. Whether it's pro-Hamas or pro-CCP agitators, administrators apologize to and actually encourage some students to keep expressing their so-called meaningful discourse at the expense of the safety of other students. "It's unacceptable," she said in a statement. Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, a Republican from New York, who is also on the Education and Workforce Committee, said she looks forward to working with Molinar and Fox to hold Harvard accountable and to end China's infiltration of American universities. 3 protesters, including Wu, were placed on disciplinary probation between May 17 and May 20 over inappropriate social behavior, and they were informed of the decision on May 21, the documents show. According to the probation letters sent to the students, disciplinary probation does not appear permanently on students' transcript but will be disclosed to graduate or professional schools under certain circumstances. Investigative reports recommending disciplinary actions cited school rules that require students to behave in a mature and responsible manner and not interfere with the freedom of speech. The Chinese student who dragged Wu out of the hall was not disciplined. In a letter to the student dated May 22, academic Dean Martin West told him that he had violated school policy on physical violence and the general standards of conduct but would not be reprimanded for the violations. West said that while it was preferable that security officers handle the protest, the student's action was understandable in the context that he had received guidance from event organizers to intervene in disruptions. West also expressed deep regret that the student and his family had experienced significant harm as a result of the event. Trump says he wouldn't have to use military force if China blockades Taiwan. Former President Donald Trump said he wouldn't have to use military force against a China blockade of Taiwan because Chinese leader Xi Jinping respects him and knows I'm crazy. Trump told the Wall Street Journal editorial board on October 17 that if re-elected, he would use the threat of increasing tariffs on China-made goods to 150 to 200 to dissuade Xi from besieging Taiwan. A blockade to cut off the trade routes of the self-governed island, to cause natural resource depletion and panic among the Taiwanese, is a tactic that Beijing could deploy in an attempt to force Taiwan to surrender to its governance. The former president's comment regarding not using military force aligns with most Americans. Annual surveys by the Chicago Council on Global Affairs show a year-on-year decline in the American public's support for using the U.S. Navy to counter a Beijing blockade of Taiwan. In 2022, over 60% of Americans supported that approach. The support ratio decreased to a half last year and 37% this year. The think tank also reported that Americans prefer Taiwan to maintain its status quo over seeking independence or unification with the mainland. Americans support Taiwan's inclusion in international organizations, arming and providing other supplies to Taiwan, but not sending U.S. troops to the island. President Joe Biden has said several times that the United States would defend Taiwan if Beijing tried to annex the island by force. However, his officials walked back those statements each time, saying U.S. policy is deliberately vague on what it would do. Vice President Kamala Harris said in September 2022 that the United States would continue to oppose any unilateral change to the status quo and continue to support Taiwan's self-defense, consistent with our long-standing policy. Trump commented on the issue amid rising cross-strait tensions. China's People's Republic of China, PRC, and Taiwan's Republic of China, ROC, celebrated their respective national days on October 1 and October 10. On October 5, days before Taiwan's National Day, Taiwan President Lai Ching-te said that the PRC had just celebrated its 75th birthday, while the ROC was approaching 113 years old. In terms of age, it's absolutely impossible for the PRC to be the ROC people's motherland, Lai added. On the contrary, the ROC might be the motherland of those mainland Chinese who are over 75 years old. After Lai reaffirmed Taiwan's sovereignty again on October 10, Beijing responded with a large-scale Joint Sword 2024B drill 4 days later. Compared to the May 23 Joint Sword 2024 drill, which was conducted in response to Lai's inauguration, the October 14 exercises mentioned blockade on key ports and areas as a focus for the first time. Beijing described the 2024B drill as a resolute punishment for Lai's Taiwan independence fallacies. During the latest military exercise, China deployed 4 Coast Guard fleets to surround Taiwan and approached closer to the island than its drills in May and August of 2022, which were in response to former U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. Yao Cheng, a former Chinese Navy lieutenant colonel based in the United States, said Beijing has been working on its Taiwan blockade contingency plan since the late 1980s. Yao told NTD television on October 16 that Beijing had temporarily shelved the option of forcefully landing in Taiwan because of cost concerns. Blocking off Taiwan came to be seen as the most feasible option, he said. In an August report, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, SISE, a Washington-based think tank, outlined several blockade scenarios involving various combinations of economic lockdown measures, cyber attacks, and military bombing. The Joint Sword 2024B exercise lasted 13 hours and didn't involve firing any munitions. According to Yao, the drill was a rehearsal for quickly moving the People's Liberation Armies, PLA, Army, Navy, Air Force, and Rocket Force to plan spots to lock down Taiwan. The Pentagon said the October 14 drill was irresponsible, disproportionate, and destabilizing. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken warned China against using lies speech as a pretext for provocative actions toward Taiwan. This response from the United States wasn't enough, according to Craig Singleton, a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, a Washington-based research institution. Singleton urged the Pentagon to return a carrier strike group to the Western Pacific, currently with none, and consider new sanctions on Chinese entities that militarize the Chinese Coast Guard. On October 15 to 16, Xi Jinping visited Fujian Province, China's coastal area facing Taiwan. There were no public reports about him visiting the Navy of the Eastern Theater Command stationed there. On October 17, he visited a Rocket Force missile brigade in Anhui Province and asked them to strengthen China's strategic deterrence and combat capability. Last month, China test-fired an intercontinental ballistic missile, ICBM, into the South Pacific for the first time in 44 years.